the will. And now enter in, along with all that, dominion over. We're talking about man. God did create man, and it was good when he created him. But enter this now in the likeness and the power that man is put into the garden. What happens? Everything changes. Everything changes. And so we see in Romans chapter 3 and verse 23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And if they come short of the glory of God, and all have sinned and will sin, that's what that verse is saying. Not just sin now, but will continue to sin. The result of the coming short is transgression, missing the mark, and error. That's what would come of that. And some of the byproducts of error, some of the byproducts of man's weakness that's been instituted in that creation would be confusion, misrepresentation, preconceived ideas, stubbornness, and all-out rebellion. And then what? Blindness. People would become blind. And that's what the whole chapter is about. Chapter 9 is talking about the blind man. And that's why I bring this about, that because of sin, all sorts of sin from the beginning in the history of sin, we may suffer some because of others. Okay? And there's so much out there, there's enough to go around. And so the question that's being asked in chapter 9 itself could qualify these men of being blind. When somebody asks you a question, you can almost know how they're thinking. You can gather their presumptions, you can gather the reason that they have, and when they ask a question, okay, then you can ask them, why are you asking this question? Because they already may have something in mind already that we need to correct. Okay? So the Jews mostly had different beliefs in the sects that they had, the Judaism, different things they might have believed. There were preconceived notions of the law. There were things in the law that they understood, but then they would add to those the law. And we see some of the doctrines like transmigration of souls. Has anybody ever heard transmigration of souls? Okay. So the transmigration of souls would be somewhat of a belief system. Not saying that the disciples believed that, but possibly had some influence of it, that the soul was traveling, whether it be in a previous life or some other life, that it would travel, it would move from place to place. And so that might have been some of the things that they might have been influenced with. So amongst different things, and that's just something that I brought about in this study, is that some of the things they might believe. And so the background of their understanding is evident in their questioning. And so when we read in chapter 9, beginning of chapter 9, which I'll do, it says, and Jesus passed by and saw a man which was blind from birth. And the disciples asked, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Right away, they have the understanding it's possibly one or two. And by the question being asked right away, we can start thinking about what they believe or how they believe or where it came from. All right, so the background, we see the background. Their ignorance could have been attributed to a multitude of things, namely teaching misconceptions of Jewish rabbis, teaching the wrong thing, traditions of men contributing to their additions and subtractions of the law, confusion, assumptions being manufactured due to bias and noise, distractions. Of course, we're all subject to that today, bias and distraction of noise. But you know what? We really don't pay attention to it sometimes. You ever had something in the background, something kind of loud, and you were trying to concentrate and doing something? You can't really figure out what it is, but something's bothering you. A lot of times it might be your TV, your radio, somebody talking, and that's somewhat of a noise that's not needed. Subconsciously, that gathers up in your mind with different things, and it clutters your mind. And we get distracted that we're hearing something that we really don't want to hear. Okay? And so those are some of the biases that we have. Some of the noise, the biases could be corrected. So at this point, suffering can be caused by others. Suffering can be caused by our own sin. And then overall, inevitably, we would all suffer because of sin. Okay? And so we understand that therefore an opportunity for God's glory and blessing and honor. Because of this sin, we need to make sure that we are looking for something, some evidence of something better. Jesus makes it crystal clear as he goes on. He makes it crystal clear. Jesus answered, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but the works of God should be made manifest in him." What is Jesus saying here? Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but the works of God should be made manifest in him.
Well, first of all, he's saying that it wasn't a man's ancestors that had the problem. That wasn't the issue, but this is an opportunity.
That's right.
For Jesus to show his power. Not that the man was made lame in order for Jesus to show his power.
Mm-hmm.
Because the man was lame, Jesus is going to show his power.
Yes, there's an opportunity, there's an occasion for it. And so, yes, like you said, there's no indication here. And sometimes this could be somewhat of a different translation that's not that would make it clear, but it is an occasion because he is in the world, because there is sin in the world. Here is an occasion. You see, and he sees that, and when we read this, here is an occasion for us as Christians to look for the opportunities, to look for the occasions that we can maybe transform somebody's life slowly. Maybe not like Jesus did, but we can transform, start to begin to help them to understand something for them to chew on, something for them to be able to process and digest and maybe come away with some truth. Yes, sir.
Like you said a few moments ago, the way people talk, what they say indicates something.
That's right.
Apparently, some of them had the idea that that guy could have sinned or his parents or something. You know, they had that. It was ongoing. It was an attitude people had.
That's right. And so that attitude needs to be corrected. Okay. And so when we have the opportunity, Jesus has the opportunity here. He has the occasion here. And what's he going to do? Well, when we look at Jesus, we see our example. We see that he is the light of the world. John chapter 8 and verse 12. He is the light of the world. So whenever you turn a light on, wherever that light touches, it's going to do what? It's going to illuminate. Okay? And so when people they start teaching about Christ and teaching about all this false doctrine, is that light? If you've got gaps in there and you've got some false teaching in there, is that true light? No, light lights up everything that it touches. It even reflects, even makes shadows. Light, illuminates everything that it touches. False doctrine doesn't do that. You may mention Jesus, you may mention the church, you may mention good things, but it doesn't do with what the effect of the work and the light of the world, which Jesus is, and what we teach as Christians. We need to be that light. And he says, I must do the works of him that sent me while it is day, and the night cometh when no man can work. And so we see Jesus explicitly tells them, neither this man's parents sinned. Okay? And so Jesus makes it crystal clear. It was neither the parents, but an opportunity. And Jesus, we see that he is 100% committed to the work that is before him. Okay? And so he must do the work. He must. Jesus states this in the very next verse of chapter 4, and he says he must do the work. And this is a concept of necessity and obligation. That I must isn't just an indication of something to be advisable or expediency or it's an absolute requirement that he does the work that his Father has sent him to do. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can sleep. Now, he might be talking about simply since he's in the world incarnately as Jesus, the Son of God, he's going to do the work while he's here physically. That's most likely is what he's talking about. But he would continue to do the work, but whatever work he can do here on earth while he's here. And then the night may be talking about the night whenever, his impending death was coming. And he won't be on the earth and he won't be physically present. And some would kind of take that as, well, he's not with us anymore because you're not physically present. And so John might be referring in his writing to the night of that which would be coming when Jesus wouldn't be with them anymore once he's ascended back into heaven. But he says, I must do the works of him that sent me while it is day, and the night cometh when no man can work. And the same idea we need to be thinking about as a child of God, as a Christian. We must do the works also. We must do the works while we're in the world, take every opportunity while we're in the world to do everything that we can do to shine the light on every person that we can, the best way that we can. And that's why it's so important for us to live what we teach and teach what we live. That's the idea. Truthfully, illuminating truth upon every soul. All right? And so as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And as the Christian should say, as long as we're in the world, we should say the same thing and understand and believe the same thing. As long as we're in the world, we should be the vessels of that light. Certainly we're not the light, but we can be vessels that advocate that light, that hold that light, to communicate that light and shine that light that's in a dark place. Jesus is in a dark place here. The disciples are in a dark place here. Jesus is going to begin to shine his spiritual light. Yes, sir.
Another chapter later on, but Judas had made plans to deny, favor Jesus being crucified. But John says he went out and it was night. Of course, this is just a thought. It was dark outside. But what you're saying, Jesus talked about the light and the darkness. It just seems to me it was dark when he went out because he was praying.
Right. It could be, it could be a number of things. It could be talking about the apostles' lives, his lives, and just anything at that time dealing with light and darkness. But as we read on, when we see he says, I must do the work, we can see in the King James Version, he says, I. In the American Standard, the New American Standard, it says, we. I must do the work. And then it says, in that different translation, it says, we must do the work. Okay? We can take both translations and we can easily reconcile that. Jesus was talking about him having to do the work, and he will. But also, when he says we, that's simply telling us there's somebody else that also needs to do that work. And as I said a while ago, the Christian has the work. The disciples, if they were going to continue to follow Jesus, they have the work. Okay? And Jesus said, I must work the works of him. He has to do it. And certainly, if we're going to follow Jesus, we have to do it. We have to do the works. We have to continue to serve. We have to make ourselves available. As a Christian, we should be living in glass bowls at times. We need to be opening up our lives to other people and being able to show them that we don't just sit here, we don't just stand here and teach the gospel. We actually live those things inside this vessel. We actually want to live a life of truth because we want to go to heaven one day. Okay? And so when we look here, we see a different translation, but they pretty much mean the same thing. Okay? We can gather, it doesn't confuse us. So the night is coming when no man can do the work. Okay, when no man can, once you're in the grave, you're less effective anymore. You're not on this earth anymore, so you can't do the work that you might have wanted to do. And in life, we say, well, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that. A lot of times we've wasted our lives in many aspects. We don't want to have to say that when we get older. I should have done this and I should have done that, or I could have done better. And so the night is coming when no man can work. Our day is coming. We can't teach physically anymore with our children, with our friends, with our workers, with anybody we come in contact. And so let's consider 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5 through 8. Paul writing to Timothy. Verse 5 says, but watch thou in all things, enduring afflictions, do the work of an evangelist. Timothy was an evangelist. He would have to do a certain work and make full proof of thy ministry. And see, he's telling Timothy, first of all, watch false doctrine. We've got to watch out for false doctrine. We have to watch out for ourselves in the sinful world. And we have to watch out that we don't sin. And we have to watch what we teach. We've got a lot of watching to do. Timothy had a lot of watching to do. Watch thou in all things. Endure affliction. Do the work of an evangelist. Make full proof of thy ministry. Well, we're talking about endure affliction. Endure affliction. People are going to suffer. People have suffered. And I had mentioned Wednesday night comment that I had made that's very relevant, and I wholeheartedly believe. And that's this. When he says to endure affliction, the Christian should endure affliction. There should be no complaining. There shouldn't be anything that would bring us down or somebody else down. Somehow in our suffering, we've got to get it together, pull it together, and walk. However, it may be a slow walk spiritually, but walk. And I mentioned also, too many people in the world start becoming dependent on certain chemicals to help their character. Now, I'm an advocate of pain medicine. I love pain medicine when I'm hurting. And in the past, I could probably count how many times I've been on pain medicine through my whole life. And I don't think it's 5 times. I think the most time I've ever been on pain medicine was twice in my whole life. I don't like pain medicine unless I really absolutely need it. I've been in pain for 2.5 months when I had teeth work. Very limited. I was suffering the whole time. And so when we talk about this enduring affliction or whatever kind of suffering it is, brethren, if we're going to suffer, we have to embrace that suffering. We have to. Because if we don't embrace and experience that suffering, we're never going to come out on the other end fully understanding, fully cured. Gold and silver have to go through a suffering process to get rid of the dross in order they come out pure like they need to be. Too many people wonder why. I don't want to suffer. Why am I suffering? Brethren, the Christian's going to suffer if they're serving God truthfully. They're going to suffer. If we lose someone, if whatever, we look at Job. There's people that have suffered worse than we have. Don't allow your suffering let you turn to something that's not going to truly get rid of your suffering. It's just going to numb your mind, take you away from the reality that's going to be there later on, because you want to be fully cured when you come out of it. God has put suffering. You go to the book of James, suffering is there for a purpose. The furnace is there for a purpose in order that we can come out and truly appreciate what we've learned from that suffering. And so when I talk about the book of James, when I talk 2 Timothy here, it says, endure and do the work of an evangelist and make full proof of thy ministry. Whatever character and life that you have at home, you know what? Watch this. Be that character with your wife when you're home. Be that character with your children when you're home. Don't just do it in the public. I've seen so many people, and I've done it myself. I can't come to my conclusion. Why am I not treating my wife the way I need to be treating my wife? Why am I not treating my children the way I need to be treating my children? It starts in the home. That way it can truly shine the light outside of the home. We should always be who we are. For I am ready. Paul writing, he says, and what kind of confidence? Watch what kind of confidence, because he did so much of the work. He lived so much of what he truly needed to live, the gospel. He said, for I'm not ready to be offered up. For I am ready to be offered up. The time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight of faith and finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. And not to me only, but unto all of them also that love his appearing. See, that's the kind of confidence we want to have, that we're going to go to heaven. That's the kind of confidence we can look back and say, have I done enough? And it's always should be no, I haven't done enough. There's never we can do so much. We can't do enough. As a Christian, we can't do enough. That's how we need to be looking at it. Also in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, Paul writing to the Corinthians, therefore, my beloved, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. For as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain. See, we look at the light of the world, that is Jesus Christ at that time. We see him doing exactly his work that he needs to be doing, and he's doing it better and better as he goes along, as he gets older, and as he moves through his ministry, he's doing exactly. He's suffering, he's going all through the things, and he has confidence. He ought to have confidence because he's doing everything he needed to do. And finally, when we go to the book of Ecclesiastes, we see chapter 9, verse 5 through 10. And so this time-sided life offers the opportunity of the divine agenda, the work, and the reward of that work, making good use of our existence that it might influence many for the glory of God. These are my notes. These are my thoughts. I haven't copied it from somewhere. I'm just reading it to you because I can't remember all of it. The Christian, our physical existence must impact the present course and any age of time that he or she, the Christian, may occupy. Whatever age the Christian lives in, we need to take time and we need to make sure that our existence has an impact on the course of this world. Because the course of this world, we know where it's headed. So we have to have some kind of impact on it. If it's just a little bit, if it's just one person, we have to have an impact on it. I can say, maybe I haven't done enough work. I can say, but hopefully I've impacted some things with some of my words, with the life that I live, and things that I do when I'm out in public. Try to be the person that I want to be inside, to my wife and to my children and to my friends. And so we see here the night is coming when no man can work. Jesus is working. He is the example here. Okay? And the example of Jesus, as long as I am in the world, I am the light. Jesus' statement here seems most likely to be that of his incarnate existence. I said before, he is Jesus, would certainly make good the use of his words that he had spoken in verse 4. So what he says in verse 4, he continues on. See, we see his word there. He says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. He just said his words. Now we're going to see his deed. When we see his deed, it says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And he's doing the work. Verse 6, when he hath thus spoken, and I want to ask you a question, what is significant about this? When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, and he made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is interpretation means sent. He went his way, therefore, and washed, and came seeing. Now we see the words that God has given. And right after those words, we see the deeds. And brethren, we need to do what we say and say what we do. That's what God's doing here. That's why he is our example here that we can see. And we're hearing him and we're seeing him. They were hearing him and they were seeing him. And so what does that make us? Makes us accountable. It makes us accountable because we're reading this. But back then, remember what I read a while ago? Bless those who haven't seen and bless those who have seen and believed. Relevant to us. There's always a lesson for us in this ancient writing. And so when we look at this, first we see what John has read, and we see his word, his deed. And this, watch very carefully. We'll see Jesus' word. We'll see the Lord's word. Jesus spat on the ground, number one. He, Jesus, made clay of the spittle, number two. He, Jesus, anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay, number three. And he, Jesus, gave a command, number four. What's Jesus doing? He's doing a work. He didn't have to do that. All he had to do, just say is show sight or whatever words he wanted to use. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't just a pow and there's your sight? Why didn't Jesus do that? And I just gave you a little cheater there. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he just do like that? And your sight's back.
He needed the man to be invested as well in it, and others watching.
Exactly. The man himself had to be invested. How was it going to be invested? By going, washing. Obedience. That's it. The command and obedience. That's the idea here. Jesus did these works, and then he expected, if you believe in me, do what I say. Here's the idea with the Christian that's going to be a Christian. If we're going to obey Christ, it's not just a one-time thing, it's an all-the-time thing, and we have to obey continuously. We have to obey the command that Jesus gives us throughout the New Testament covenant, and we have to continue that command. Jesus has done his work, and he continues to do that work. And Jesus gave the command, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. The waters were channeled into the city, and that's why they get that word, because they were channeled in from the city into that area, the pool of Siloam. Okay, so the blind man went, he washed, he obeyed, and he came back seeing. Yes, ma'am.
I've often wondered, in my teen mind, he couldn't see. He had mud in his eye. Did someone help him to the pool? Now he's been there before. Did they help him to the pool? Get up and go. How did he do that?
Yeah, he did. That's a good question. That's a good question. You know, you read different translations, they have different answers. And so that's a good question. How did he do that? He might have gotten used to the city. He might have found a way, because when people are blind, they grow up blind. They get used to feeling and touching and knowing. They might have little assistance, whatever. So the example here, we can go back to the account of what we can learn from the old scriptures. Romans 15:4 tells us, for what was written aforetime is for our learning. Well, let's go back and learn something for what is written aforetime. Remember Naaman? Who was Naaman? He was a Syrian army commander. Elisha, the prophet, commanded this commander to go and wash into the river Jordan 7 times. What happened? Remember that account? Well,
I said at first that aren't the 2 rivers in my country more or less?
Damascus? Yeah.
And of course, there was nothing in the water. It's just following what he was told.
That's right.
And he was healed, and he done it some other way.
That's it.
And there's something very interesting I see in later on in the chapter. The people who are at odds with Jesus, they said, "Are we blind?" And of course he said,
That could be a rhetorical question, huh?
Yeah.
For the one opposing in that. Well, when we look at Naaman, we see, we could be like Naaman. Some people can be like Naaman. Naaman has a thought, and he gets upset, and he tells everyone, I thought he would come out. I thought Elisha would come out himself. He sends his servant instead. Come out and smack, the vessel, or just a big grandiose appearance, and all this he thought this was going to happen, occurred that way. And so he gets upset, and he goes on his way. And when we think about that, when we have an event, whenever we have something we got to go do that we really don't want to do, we have to go somewhere with the wife, and we don't always want to go there, and you know how that thing goes. What happens is we get a thought of how things might be. We get a thought how things might play out. We get a thought already in our minds how we want it to be. Naaman had his own thoughts, and that's why he's making himself mad. He's making himself upset. We tend to do that because we expect too much sometimes in our own minds. And we should just live life and be expectant of what could happen, the possibilities that I might be wrong about certain things. He was wrong about a certain thing until a soft servant's voice came and spoke to him and gave him reason, his own servant. What did Naaman do? He went and did 7 times. He had to do that, but he had to obey the words that was given to him by man, by a prophet. that he thought might come out and meet him himself. And he was healed. The blind man had to do that too. He had to obey the command. So many people in this world don't realize what they're being taught. And some preachers that come out of the churches of Christ are slowly infiltrating the world with false doctrine. Be careful what you read, brethren. Be careful. And what you're reading, you better compare that with God's word. Okay? Because they can fool you. They have. And so as we go along, we see we're very limited on time. And we see the light begins to expose darkness. We'll continue next week, but as I finish, as this setting plays out, we see that the blind man has been made to see. He is obeyed. He is excited. You know, if you were blind all your life and all of a sudden you were made to see, if you don't even talk to anybody, it's going to show in your face. It's going to show in your walk. It's going to show in your attitude that something's different about this person. And the light begins to shine in that community because of this man. The effects of Jesus' light and his power and his working is beginning to infiltrate the dark world. And the dark world begins to react. The blind man's reacting. Those around him are reacting. And the blind men are brought to the Pharisees, that sect of the Pharisees, and everybody in that area are beginning to react to what? The light, the power, the evidence that Jesus had just worked. The light and it's going to cause division even among the Pharisees and what they say and how they try to believe this or not, or what could have happened. That's the effect that light has in the dark world. It's not that we're trying to make division or confusion. We're preaching God's word, and it will create division. The book of Matthew points that out very clearly, even in the family. Okay? And we'll continue on as we go next week. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.